Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Future of Education. Today is Friday, September 17th, and I'm coming in live with Alec Koros and a group of about 40 educators from Concordia School in Shanghai, China. And our special guest tonight is David Kahn from Montessori High School at University Circle in Cleveland. Welcome, David.
Glad to be here. Or there.
We're enjoying that. Thank you, David. So Future of Education is sponsored by my employer, Illuminate, and the project I work on for Illuminate is called Learn Central. It's a free social network for educators, and it has Illuminate baked in, and you can use it for free. Coming up, we have announced our Global Education Conference in November. This is a free worldwide conference, 5 days, multiple time zones, multiple languages, multiple tracks, and all for free. Go to globaleducationconference.com for more information. Coming up on the Future of Education on September 28th, when I'm back in the States, Paul Peterson talks about his book, Saving Schools. Ben Daly's going to talk about High Tech High. DiMartino and Walk are going to talk about their book, The Personalized High School. Then we have Sylvia Martinez, Roger Shank, and Kathleen Cushman's coming back for her student panel on homework. And lots more fun ahead. Please feel free to look at futureofeducation.com for that schedule. Of course, all events are free, and we hope you'll join us. If you've missed a session, all of the sessions have been recorded. Last week, Charles Fidel spoke on 21st century skills in STEM. We had George Siemens on connectivism. We looked at the BYU Idaho learning model. Kathleen Cushman talked about her book, Fires in the Mind. Lots of fun there. Amber Mack, Carol Dweck, Linda Darling-Hammond. Much, much more, all in recorded form, both in MP3s for podcast and full Illuminate recordings. If this is your first time in Illuminate, it is a collaborative, participative environment. We won't go through the full tool set here because we're short on time today. But please feel free to raise your hand. When we go to Q&A, you can actually ask a question using the mic. If you think you want to use the microphone, go up to Tools, Audio, and run the Audio Setup Wizard to make sure you're ready for that. And this is where you get to show us where you are on the map. And normally I'm in boring Northern California, but I get to put a star here in Shanghai. And feel free to put in the chat where you're listening from or participating from. And you look for the wand with the red star at the end to put that star on the map. So you click on the wand with the red star, and then you click on the map. So we have Australia, China, looks like maybe France, North America, Luxembourg. And we have a whole group here. We should put a big star in China. So, David, thanks so much for coming on. I know this was short notice, and our thanks to Lori, who helped to arrange this. Lori's one of the cohorts here in Shanghai, cohort leaders. I'm going to pull up the website for everybody to see the description of your school. And can you give us a little bit of background? I know it's a new school, and kind of tell us what makes it unique.
Okay, well, to begin with, it may be a new school, but it's in a 100-year tradition, which is the Montessori tradition, and we've been conceiving this school for over, I would say, 13 years, with a plan of study that was in the making starting in 2004. We opened in 2008 with 37 students, and then doubled our enrollment the following year to over 70. We're now up to 80 in our third year. We're part of a Montessori project called Project 2012, which is to deliver a developmentally sensitive approach to adolescent education using a place-based focus. That is, where place teaches, where responsibilities are found in reality, and complementary curriculum then is evolved from realistic situations. The first half of adolescence is devoted to the farm as teaching place, farm as microcosm community, farm as producer, and a microeconomy, farm as a teacher about nature, both man-made relationships to nature and also the natural world in juxtaposition, since the farm is located in the middle of a beech oak stand and natural wetland. The second half is our high school. It's located in University Circle, which is a square mile, and it's a square mile of 41 institutions, and it's the institutions are our best cultural institutions in Cleveland, including the Cleveland Orchestra, that's world-renowned, the Natural History, Cleveland Museum of Natural History, the Western Reserve Historical Society, the Cleveland Botanical Garden, the the Cleveland Institute of Art, the Cleveland Art Museum, the Cleveland Institute of Music, which prepares musicians for the Cleveland Orchestra. I can go on and on and on, but I think you might want some different kind of information.
So, David, can you give us a short overview of what the Montessori tradition is? And there aren't that many Montessori high schools, are there?
No, I would say in the United States, bona fide, that is well-researched Montessori high schools that are attempting to approximate the Montessori idea, there's probably 15. Coincidentally, because Montessori high schools were started in Holland in the 1920s, there are 33 Montessori high schools in the in Amsterdam region in the Netherlands. And these are really not Montessori, but they're Montessori in name. They're really, Montessori there is another word for progressive high school. So what does Montessori high school mean, or what does Montessori mean? Montessori means that we look at the psychological characteristics of the student at every stage of development, and then we try to set up a corresponding what we call prepared environment, a learning environment that relates dynamically to those inner needs and of whatever developmental period, whether it be early childhood, whether it be childhood, whether it be adolescence. These are early adolescence, late adolescence. They all have different developmental characteristics, and we have programs that we design to respond to those developmental characteristics and maximize engagement, because we've touched the very sensitive periods these students are evolving at the time that they move through our environments. Am I speaking too fast?
No, just about right. Hey, so can you tell us, the group here is looking specifically at what education might look like in 2020, and one of the questions that keeps coming up for us is the role of technology. So what role has technology played or not played in your concept of what you're doing at the school? Well,
everyone has a MacBook. The science lab is equipped with a electronic system for reading out all microscope work, all sensor work. We have smart boards, and you know, my honest opinion is that they are basically irrelevant to future education as compared to the social dynamic that adolescents need to experience with each other and with their immediate community and world at large. So that even though you have great cyberspace and all kinds of information gathering devices through the internet, what's really fundamental to this age group is their contact with the international world, particularly cultures different from their own. This is what really creates excitement, engagement, and a sense of, shall I say, identity, because, you know, you can't experience culture really through a hookup, in my opinion. I don't know, for instance, who you are. I figure you're a pretty good speaker. You certainly know the technology of Illuminate. but I don't get any sense of your person. This is a fairly clinical connection compared to what it would be if I were sitting in front of you. Even if I had the image of you, it's not quite the same. Now, maybe I sound a little reactionary, but what I really think is that, yes, I think technology serves our students very well, but it also distracts them. And most of us know that in working with different aspects of research on the internet, that you can get very quick feedback, but not necessarily in-depth research skills. So it's a mix. I guess what I'm saying, I'm giving you a mixed message. Technology is wonderful. It's amazing. The kids love it, but they also get, as we all know, psychologically immersed in it and lose some of their sociability and qualities of human development that are so important, particularly for adolescents. Did I say the wrong thing?
No, you did not say the wrong thing. I think in a lot of ways, our group of the two cohorts, I can't speak for the second cohort, but our cohort talked about a lot of the same themes that you touched, and we were intrigued because we built sort of a wish list for a school in the future and got to the end of that wish list and realized that we hadn't mentioned technology at all. Why don't you give us a description of the partnership programs that you're doing with the museums and organizations nearby?
Well, the partnerships begin with encounter with the real scientists, the real curators, the real gardeners, the real artists. We try to avoid the education departments. The education departments are geared to tours, and they are geared to revolving door types of field trips. We want sustainable, ongoing relationships with these museums, so we try to get right up to the power structure. We try to say that, look, we're going to bring money to your institution because we're going to create natural partnerships. Let me give you an example. At the Natural History Museum, we have a fairly well-known vertebrate paleontologist. His name is Mike Ryan. And last year, the beginning of September a year ago, he took 11 students into Mongolia. In fact, Lori Hekela's daughter was there. And, well, Mongolia, the Gobi Desert, kids generally don't go to the Gobi Desert. They wouldn't last a minute in the Gobi Desert. So how did it get started? Well, we took some of the tuition from our school. Parents did some funding. We did some fundraising. We actually almost funded the expedition ourselves. The Natural History Museum kicked in about 25%. It was an international team of paleontologists, some from Mongolia, some from Canada, some from the States, and then there were Mongolian students there who also participated. So it was a total cultural immersion in an environment which actually transformed them in a way because it's so remote from, well, Cleveland weather. I mean, there's nothing like the Gobi, and it's so remote and beautiful, stunningly beautiful, and stunningly violent. I mean, hot, windy, sandy, and something happened. These kids had to find purpose in what they were doing there. They started identifying fossils, digging up fossils. They found out about poachers and the notoriety of poachers and how poachers are destroying scientific evidence about life on Earth. And they became radicalized by that. They wanted to stop poaching. Two of them want to be vertebrate paleontologists. Only one of them so far has actually majored in it. She's since graduated. So that's an example of a fairly sensational approach. We're also working with the Cleveland Botanical Garden. The Cleveland Botanical Garden has two biomes, a Madagascar desert biome and a Costa Rican cloud forest. These are in a glass house, and they are, in a sense, simulations. These particular environments were set up for their wow effect. So people would walk in and they'd go, wow, this is incredible. How did they ever do this? Butterflies galore, birds flying through, a virtual menagerie of reptiles, walking across the paths. But the question was, well, does anyone come back? Very little repeat business, minimal signage. So our job, our collaboration will be to create a speaker series. Our kids will create a speaker series. We will work with the horticulturalists at the Botanical Garden to bring back some of the expertise that built the garden, built the biomes in the first place. I will have to say that all the expertise and all the background behind the biomes went with change in personnel. There's only one person left that knows anything about them. So this is the kind of vital functions that we work out with these partnerships. We pay them some money out of our tuition for their time, for their training, but we also do a great deal of service. Now, we have a conventional memorandum of understanding so that they know that we mean business. This is not a volunteer kind of program. It's a serious collaboration. I think it's also important to realize that each of these institutions become a catapult into the world. We tried to get, with the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, we catapulted into Mongolia. With the Botanical Gardens, we will go to Costa Rica or Madagascar. I understand the politics are a little rough right now, but they want to go places. They want to travel. They want to be relevant to the world. That's first-hand information. That's not cyberspace. Another trip we did was self-sponsored without an institution to Oaxaca, Mexico, working with indigenous cultures. What's characteristic about the trip? Again, it's a culture very different from our culture. Once they're in a different culture, a radically different culture with radically different conditions, mostly impoverished, it becomes an instant learning experience where all the elemental skills, I would say skills of the 21st century, are about survival. They're about understanding the world and how it interrelates. They're about understanding agriculture and its importance, all the natural elements of the natural world. So when they go to these places, they become increasingly aware because it's so different. The habitats are different and the people are poor. And so they're not blinded by human infrastructure and build-up and urban realities that shield you from really any kind of real encounter with humanity and the environment of humanity.
Am I right in thinking that you actually positioned the school at its current location because of the proximity of these organizations?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was an insane idea because it was so expensive. In fact, we raised the value of real estate in University Circle because we wanted to emancipate some really beautiful houses that were stage center. So we're right across the street from the Western Reserve Historical Society, and then going around the literal circle, there's the Art Museum, then the Botanical Gardens, then the Case Western Reserve Law School. Looking out a little further, there's the Cleveland Institute of Art. Looking to the left, a beautiful brand new concert center at the Cleveland Institute of Music, 800 recitals a day. I mean, it costs millions to locate, and it's the international Montessori community that supported it. And by the way, we've had the Chinese come twice to look at this approach and the farm school approach which preceded it. And I believe China's very interested in it. And of course, maybe you know this and maybe you don't. There are close to 6,000 Montessori schools in China. So I just want to bring that to your attention since you're there in Shanghai. So yes, of course I located it here, and I've had to pay the price, but it's a payback. The resources here are beyond compare. You're looking, by the way, at a house that I'm sitting in that building that you're looking at now. I stayed at work because I live an hour away from work in the country. So I want you to know I'm half awake, and that I'm in my office, and that's the house. That's a Schreinsforth building. It's a very famous architect here in Cleveland. It was built in 1910. It cost us $1 million to purchase. We have a quarter acre to the left of that house. That was at $500,000, and then another $1.5 million to rehab. All the money was paid by the Montessori community to see this happen because the experiment is consistent with her philosophy.
David, this is an abbreviated interview because of the circumstances. What you're saying is fascinating. There are questions I have, but I want to move to a quick Q&A so that the people here at the Learning Conference can ask you a couple of questions. And if you're one of the virtual audience members, please feel free to raise your hand. That's the hand with the green up arrow to ask a question. And you can do that either by taking the microphone or putting the question in the chat. So we have our first question here.
Okay. I'd like to start by saying that I love the model, but I have slight concerns about being practical.
Oh.
I'm very interested in the model, but I have concerns about the practicality of mass, this is on a mass scale. Can people really travel around the world like we were describing? Is there a scaled down version you can imagine?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there is a proliferation of travel opportunities being made available to adolescents much faster than you would think. For instance, we went to the United Nations not to participate in a model UN event, which was a simulation of how the UN works with young children grades 1st through 8. We didn't go for that. We went to observe it, and when we went to observe it, they asked us to give a lecture to the whole group there, 800 kids and maybe 20 diplomats. And so we gave a talk on peace, education and peace, which is a Montessori theme. And immediately, having seen our kids and the sophistication with which they presented themselves, and also a whole auditorium of Montessori children from all over the United States, really all over North America, some from Europe, the diplomats were quite impressed. So what they did is they said, well, we'll invite you over. Would you be interested in building Montessori early childhood schools in our country? We got an invitation from Sri Lanka, one from Benin, let's see where else, one from South Africa, there were one from Dominican Republic. So the interest in a developmental early childhood education program was put forward by these diplomats to our adolescents with invitations to come to the country. Then we go to corporates or we go to private individuals, and we say, well, would you like to fund this trip? And I'm sure there are foundations that specialize in funding these kinds of trips. Now, whether or not our kids can build a school out of indigenous materials when they get there, well, that's another question. We have to solve that question. I think it's doable. I think it's doable for anybody who puts their mind to it, but you start with preparation. You don't just go out traveling. You can do that with, an expedition, paid expedition. This is a carefully construed curriculum which builds a framework for internationalism. I don't know if you know, but we collaborate with the International Baccalaureate. We have a hybrid, Montessori and International Baccalaureate. So we deal with internationalism as a state of mind. We give our kids basics in anthropology, basics in individual psychology, basics in sociology, and we build all those sciences, all those lenses. We look onto history and travel from that standpoint. You can go any place, anytime, and build an understanding about that culture. That's the spirit of the training, even before we go into the field. I was finished.
So, David, one of the tensions that has been expressed here within the cohorts is the need to make sure that their students do well on the standardized tests to get into prestigious universities. How have you addressed that concern?
Well, we do our SAT preparation, and we're aware of the demand, but the pre-collegiate pressures are not necessarily conducive to world education. And I think what you're going to find more and more is that college admissions are going to be looking for students that do diversified kinds of service in diversified places, and that the test will assume more and more second place, or even third place. Also, the International Baccalaureate has a lot of prestige with colleges these days because it's like an extremely demanding curriculum, and it's externally assessed and internationally assessed. So we're finding really the old adoration of test scores, I think, is rapidly disappearing. And many times I think high test scores don't necessarily mean that you're going to get a student that's engaged, mature, or for that matter, any guarantees. So you really have to assume a holistic view of the child, who is the student that's emerging, and if you're really after 21st century skills, that has a lot to do with active engagement, understanding different sides of the argument, identifying relationships between particular areas of study and the whole world, the whole to the detail and the detail to the whole. This is not about test scores, and you just have to let go of some of that. I mean, most of these kids, if they're engaged, if they are using the disciplines to unlock the secrets of the world and getting out into the world, they're going to excel on these tests anyway. So it's a I think it's a pseudo preoccupation.
So I've given the microphone to Salva. Salva, would you like to ask your question?
You listen to me? Is the sound okay?
Coming through a little muffled, but we can't hear you.
Now it's okay? Are you listening to me good? Is it okay now?
I can't understand. Someone will repeat the question after he says it.
I don't know if you listen to me, if you hear me. Okay. My question is if in your farm, if you are having different approach in the sense of agriculture, if are you using a chemical-based agriculture, or if you are using organic techniques, and if that is part of the debate between the students, and what are the conclusions?
Repeat the question, please.
Do you use organic farming?
I'm completely beyond audio at this point. I can't hear Salva.
So I think what Salva asked was if you're using organic farming.
Is there any other kind of farming, Salva? I mean, basically now we're not licensed organic for the farm school. This is for children 12 to 15. We're not licensed organic, but we are not using any artificial fertilizers, no bug sprays. But to be licensed in the United States, you have to go through quite a bit of paperwork. So yes, our methods are organic, but we are not certified organic.
Individualized approach to learning. How do they show results, or how do
David?
They demonstrate their progress?
So we've got a question from one of the members here. Since Montessori uses
An individualized approach to instruction.
An individualized approach to instruction, how do you monitor or assess the student learning?
Individually. Well, to begin with, we have a formal approach to observation, what you would call an alternative assessment, on-site observation. Now, the first thing we look for in a student is level of engagement. That is, to what degree are they collaborating in their work, because for adolescents it's not individualized anymore. although we're looking at individual trajectories, that is, what direction is their whole personality going, what career paths do they seem to be considering, what are their styles of learning, and so forth. So this comes out of observation. I mean, we have also products. You know, this is typically done with portfolios. In our case, because we're small, we can more directly encounter the work, see what the student's able to produce. We check in the work, check over the work. A lot of the work comes over the computer so that we aren't doing as much on-paper correcting. A lot of tracking changes, which those of you know is sometimes a disadvantage because kids do not have to. They can use spell check. They can do different shortcuts with rewrites that they can't do and with hard copies. But generally speaking, we look at the writing, we look at the research skills. We put a lot of emphasis on research skills, much less emphasis on chronological content. For instance, in history, it's how do we acquire the knowledge that's important. It's not really just the factual content. So we don't test for factual content, we test for research skills, accessing information. So fundamentally, in a small school, assessment's not a problem. In Montessori, the focus is on holistic observation, and observation is based on seeing what the points of engagement are and then responding in kind, creating a spiral of engagement and what Csikszentmihalyi calls flow. In other words, at a certain optimal point, the student loses self-consciousness, forgets about, you know, the surrounding distractions, and launches into an incredible kind of altered state of engagement, which has been characterized by us as normalization by Csikszentmihalyi, who's a fairly famous psychologist from the University of Chicago, now at the Claremont in California. He calls it flow. So one of the aspects of engagement is seeing students really excited. We can measure that almost through observation and through participation. We use the seminar quite a bit. The seminar is the classical Socratic seminar, which is the art of interpretation and the art of asking questions. So that in effect, we ask questions that can't be answered with yes and no. We work with primary source material. There is multiple interpretations, no right answer, but yet we're trying to problem solve along the same line. So the problem solving is interdisciplinary, it's interpretive, it involves our observation of engagement in the problem solving, and that's basically, in very rough, short language, how we define assessment.
So David, I really want to thank you for coming on the show in these unique circumstances. This has been abbreviated. There's so much more we would like to ask you, but we are under some time constraints. So we're going to clap for you here.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, it was very interesting for me. I've never done this before, and I can tell I'm passionate about this idea, and it's working well. I just want to report that these students will be ready to encounter problem solving in any medium, in any culture, and will want to be doing it. And I think that's what we're after for the 21st century, students that want to be relevant to the world.
Thank you so much.
Hi.
Thanks to Learn Central and Illuminate for sponsoring the series. Please do look at futureofeducation.com for upcoming events and for the recordings. Thanks, David. Thanks for everybody who attended. Thanks to the cohorts who are here. We're going to sign off now. Take care.